Hi, Soli, and welcome to Queer Magic. Really great to have you on Queer Magic, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. So I know you from Twitter, where I'm following you, and you're a librarian, which is an extremely powerful and important role in the world. What else? Oh, a polytheist.
Yep.
Non-binary. So that's awesome. Anything else you want to add?
Well, let's see. I keep my Twitter profile a little bit bland on purpose because there is a little bit of an intersection with my professional life, and there are some things that I just don't want to deal with on a professional level. So I am primarily Kemetic Orthodox in the House of Netjer, where I'm a divine daughter of Wepawet, and as of 2019, a consecrated Wab priest in his service. I'm also an initiated Hunsi in Haitian Voodoo from 2017, and I am some measure of heathen doing witchcraft as well. That I've been trying to work out for. I was heathen for a long time and active in the heathen community, and then that dropped off when I became more active as a Kemetic in the late 2000s. And I'm still trying to negotiate where things stand in that regard. So
cool.
It's a lot of work. I don't necessarily advocate people doing 3-4 traditions together.
Yeah, it's hard work. Like one tradition is hard work. I've tried doing 2 and it was too much. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I specifically keep priest work to one place because that's more than enough on its own.
Yeah, I would have said so. Yeah, having tried that, it's like, no, it's far too much like hard work.
Yeah.
So you mentioned early 2000s so how long overall have you been involved in paganism, polytheism?
Paganism, occult things since in some measure since 1992, so that's coming up on 30 years now, and I'm just trying to figure out how it's even been that long and how I've been doing this in some form or another for that long. Like, is that even possible? Because I'm not that old, really.
Yeah, it's about the same length of time as me. So, yep. 1985, I guess. Well, and then I was initiated into Wicca in 1991. So, yeah, about the same length of time.
I have to say I'm really impressed with people who found Wicca before the internet, because I know having some interest in modern pagan history, that was not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, well, it helped being in the UK.
So. Yes. So hats off to you for that.
But yeah, it was probably tricky. I mean, somebody else helped me, so
yeah.
And the network was good. You know, like people actually phoned each other up and talked to each other. So
they did that. Oh,
yeah, I know, actual telephones. Like, wow, yeah, and well before mobiles as well. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so tell us a bit about your position on the queer landscape.
In queerness, I say I'm bisexual and queer. And at this point, we're getting to a stage where I'm not sure if the queer is as necessary or the bisexual is necessary for me, because there's still a lot of stigmatism against bisexuality and bi people. The queerness, it's the otherness of the queerness that I like. I also like, there was a phrase going around in the 90s in the gay, lesbian, bisexual, queer, etc. community. It's not gay as in happy, but queer as in fuck you.
Yeah, right on. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, it's like, you know, I think Misha talks about being multiply queer, and it's like, okay, I am multiply queer, so like, just try putting me in a box. So the catch-all nature of that appeals to me as well.
Yes, which is also why I like genderqueer.
Yes.
As a term, because it's queer as in fuck you, and genderqueer as in fuck your gender standards.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I am a genderqueer woman. I am some measure of genderqueer because I've never quite been sure where I fit in that spectrum myself. But there's just a level where I am she, yes, but I am something that is not just she. So my pronouns are she and they.
Yeah, I used to do both, and then I was like, okay, I feel like I got to pick one. So So I picked they.
Yeah, I
But
think
if you
both.
don't have to pick one, then that's totally fine.
Kemetic philosophy, theology is not a lot of either or. There's a lot of both and. So why not embrace both and in more areas of life?
Yeah, why not? I mean, that's the thing, you know, as a bisexual, non-binary, genderqueer person, it's like,
Yeah.
great, I can see both sides of quite a lot of questions.
Like that gift from what is it, The Search for El Dorado? Why not both? Both is good.
Both is good. So your tradition is accommodating of queerness and
Definitely.
gender variance.
Yeah. Kemetic religion wasn't necessarily historically like queer specific, but there were people who weren't in heterosexual relationships in ancient Egypt, and it wasn't frowned upon the way it is in our modern culture. So it is definitely a part of that landscape. And our gods, I think our gods take on gender more as a convenience for humans than so much that they just are that like I'm a man, I am a woman. Like, no, I'm a deity. I am way outside of that whole gender thing y'all humans got going on. And also there are some interesting syncretisms in Kemetic cosmology, because Kemetic polytheism isn't, at least as we do it in the House of Netjer, we are soft polytheists in that God is both this big united all and separate individual deities.
Yeah.
And you get both aspected deities and syncretized deities that come up at different points in history. The two of the deities in syncretized deities in Kemetic tradition, there's Sekhmet, Bast, Ra, which I can't even begin to comprehend, and I haven't seen any images of, so I don't know how that got interpreted. But one image I do know of is Sekhmet Nin.
Mm.
Sekhmet, Lionhead goddess, very popular. A lot of people know of her. Nin isn't as known, but if he is known for his imagery, which is the proud phallus sticking out. So you do find historical images of Sekhmet Nin as this lion-headed goddess with a big dick.
Ah, neat.
Yes. Yes, and there's also the goddess Neat. Well, in our tradition, we say Neat. In the Middle Egyptian, in Greek, she is Neat.
Oh, yes, right.
She is a creator deity. She is bi-gendered. She is both male and female, and one of her titles is the mother of the father and the father of the mothers.
Cool.
Mother of the fathers and father of the mothers.
Neat.
Exactly.
Very neat. That's very cool.
And she's one of the goddesses that I have a close relationship with. So I always have warm fuzzies when I think of her to begin with. And I love that she just bursts through those gender binaries and just doesn't give a fuck.
That's awesome. Fantastic. Yeah, like, I mean, it's so important to have queer representation in your pantheon as well.
Yeah.
And I definitely experience Sekhmet and Bast as hanging out together.
Oh yes, definitely. They have a lot in common, and Sekhmet is also an aspect of the goddess Hathor, or Hetert as we call her. There are historical deep connections with Hathor and Bast.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember exactly what it is. Bast is the southern Hetert, and Hetert is the northern Bast.
Oh.
Is one of the ways it was phrased historically. So they're different, but they also have big overlap. So Hetert also becoming Sekhmet in the mythology, therefore there's a level where Bast and Sekhmet are very much alike as well.
Yes. That makes sense to me. Also, I found out the other day that there's some kind of connection between Bast and Balbo, the Greek very queer goddess that I really like.
Okay, I do not know this deity, so
well, she pops up in the myth of Demeter, where so Demeter's mourning the fact that Persephone has gone off with Hades, and she so Demeter's crying and is, oh, everything's bad. And then Bao shows up and goes, come on, let's get drunk and have a party because, you know, you need cheering up. So she's like your best mate that shows up when you're having a bad time and plies you with wine and starts telling you dirty jokes to cheer you up. And
the flashes her vulva?
Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah, I kind of thought so. Yes.
Yeah. So she shows up in the Thesmophoriae, which is the mysteries of Demeter at Eleusis. And she does this dance where she like manipulates her belly as well to make funny shapes, and I love her because she's just really a bit nuts, and that's great, you know?
And that's exactly what you need sometimes.
Yeah, she's like if you're familiar with Bridget Jones, she's like Shazza.
Okay.
Bridget Jones's best mate, who didn't get into the movie but is in the books, and she's like, yeah, let's get drunk, men, fuckwitting. She's great. So,
sounds like a right good time to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really into Bao. She's great. But yeah, and then I found out she had a connection to Bast, and I'm like, see, I knew there was a reason I like Bast.
Yeah. Also cats. Cats are wonderful.
Yes, absolutely. Although Bast is apparently very keen to emphasize that she's not just about cats.
No, she's totally not just about cats. It's kind of bad marketing on some 19th century Egyptologist part, perhaps.
Yeah. But that is how a lot of people get into Bast. So, you know,
that's true.
It's like Tom Cox, you know, Tom Cox is not just about cats. He's about landscape too.
Okay. I was also going to add that being in the community I'm in, we're not a queer religion. We have a whole lot of queer folks in our community. We have a lot of non-binary folks. We have transgender folks. We have non-white members. So the gods will tailor their experiences a lot of times to the devotee they're interacting with. So I know other people have stories of different deities taking on specific roles with non-binary people. Like I know a few people who experience the goddess Amunet, the female Amun, as being a guardian over trans-feminine people. I don't personally have a relationship with her, so I can't say, but given her, Amun has a very interesting liminality, so Amunet would as well. So I could see that as getting beyond those hard distinctions of gender. And I could see that as very easily being something that she would be a guardian of and being interested in and protecting people who fall into that space.
Makes sense. I mean, I also think that with the Sumerian religion, which is kind of a couple of countries over from Egypt, right? That there's a lot of transness in that as well. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing. A religion, there shouldn't need to be a specifically queer religion, because religion, particularly paganism, which is meant to be, and polytheism, which is meant to be like queer inclusive from the get-go. You know, like one of my impulses in going on about inclusive Wicca is like, okay, I'm bisexual, so you know, I want you know, different sex imagery and same-sex imagery together in my practice. So like having a sort of purely queer or purely heterosexual practice or religion like really excludes bisexual people.
I do know of a tradition that's not mine because it's meant for men, male identifying people, called the Unnamed Path.
Oh yeah. Well, they include non-binary. I asked them specifically the other day, and they include non-binary, and you know, anybody can join that identifies with queer stuff.
And I think that's wonderful. I think that's how it should be. But I still think there's a place for having, I guess you can't necessarily call it single gender mysteries, but I think there's a place for groups for men and groups for women. but also groups for non-binary people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but within the overarching, yeah.
Yeah.
Clearly there are queer mysteries, and that's great.
And there are mysteries around gender and around not gender, and not even everybody wants to explore that, but I think the people who want to explore that and need to explore that should have a space where they can do that.
Yeah, but it just shouldn't necessarily exclude other people, but it should be focused on that thing. Like, you know, if you want to have mysteries for people who menstruate, that's totally fine. But make it mysteries for people who menstruate, not you know, not turf mysteries kind of thing.
What are turf mysteries? Are those how to cut the bangs right?
Yeah, I don't know. How to create the smallest possible box to live in.
Yeah.
Yes. So
getting comfortable in there.
Yeah. So as well as your Kemetic practice, do you practice on your own or in a group? Or, I mean, before we all had to shift everything onto Zoom, obviously.
For Kemetic, we have both individual practices that we get when there's a beginner's class for the House of Nature, and one of the things you get in that is the core rite, which is effectively a modern rite, but it's drawn from historical sources. And you do that on your own because most likely you're not going to have anybody nearby who is practicing as well. Like, we're scattered around the globe, but we're also scattered around the globe. And it's a big deal when we find out there's someone who's relatively in our area.
Yeah.
We can just get together with. So for most of the time it's on our own. We do have gatherings and we do have meetups. And then we can do the ritual together. It's called Senut. We've done the group Senuts, and they're a very different thing when they're done together, but they're just as powerful, just in a different way.
Yeah.
Like anything, it's when you do something on your own, it's one way and it's really nice. And when you do it with another person or a lot of people, it's a very different thing, but it's really nice. At least it should be really nice.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm speaking a metaphor for other things, and that's just kind of, I didn't want to go there this early in the morning.
Yeah, totally fair. It's still too early in the morning.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Voudou. So I wanted to mention a few things about that.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
The House I'm in Voudou, we have a lot of queer folks in our Voudou house. And in Haiti, there are specifically houses where you can only join if you are gay or lesbian. So I think it's great that Haitian Voudou has that inclusivity already, and didn't have to have people come in the late 90s and decide, this isn't working out quite right.
Yeah, it's incredible. They're very inclusive.
You had a community to begin with, and you had this, you had a history of community. And also, Haiti sometimes gets a reputation for being a lot of different and not so complementary things. But I think in some ways they're a lot more, they're doing things that we should have been doing a long time ago with white people.
Yeah.
And
more power to their elbow. Yeah.
Like Izuli Freda loves gay men. And you wouldn't necessarily think this spirit who on the surface seems so prim and proper and wanting the best in life, which she does. But she also she loves gay men, and I know a few gay men who are devotees of her. And then there's her sister Zili Danto, who I love as a bisexual woman because she has something of a bisexual energy to her. And there's also the gay days in Haitian Voudou who are very bawdy. And I apologize for my phone that I forgot to silence. I think that sound might have come up. And they're just very life-loving and sexual and inappropriate, and everybody is fair game.
Cool. Yeah, I think it sounds like the whole thing was kind of led by the gods there in a way, by the Orishas. Sorry, is it Orishas or Loa in Haitian?
Loa in this case. Orishas are Lukumi Santeria.
Right, that's it. Yeah, so it sounds like the Loa actually took the lead on that one.
Yes, I know in Africa, and what's done in Africa for the Yoruba religion isn't always the same as what's done in here in the diaspora.
Mm.
And there's a lot of differences, and some of them are just from having moved and maybe not having all the keepers of the tradition come with them, and some of them are also things that came in from colonialism.
Yeah, well, and also the fact that they were forcibly moved, and
Yeah.
and people from different nations ended up in different places and mixing together. So
that's something you really see in Voodoo, because
yeah,
we have some Orishas in Voodoo, and they're in their own nation, their own community, called Nago.
mm.
So you see, like in Lukumi, you have Obatala, we have Ogu Batala.
Right.
And they're all in the Nago Nation, they're all named Ogu, but they're not Ogun.
Ah.
So there's I'm not going to go into like the differences between the various African traditional religions and diasporic religions here, but it's fascinating to me to see.
It is, yeah. Like there's a guy I know called Tim Landry who's been doing a lot of work on that because he's an anthropologist, and you know, so he's done study of the African traditional religions in Africa and also in the Caribbean. So
does he have any published work?
I think the book is either just come out or is about to come out.
Send me that information later. I'm really curious to see, and I'll also look up and see if he has any articles.
Yeah, it's going to be good stuff. Like,
yeah,
definitely going to read that one.
Yeah, I'm so ready for that.
Yeah, it's really good. He really knows what he's talking about in a big way. He gave a talk for the Center for Pagan Studies over the summer, and it was really, really good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Voodoo, like I said, Voodoo is very great for embracing people who aren't heterosexual. I don't know what kind of non-binariness or transness exists in Haitian communities, so I can't really talk about it on that front.
But I would imagine they would be very open-minded about it.
I hope so. I know sometimes, because the country is overall Catholic, so there can be that level of conservatism in there.
Yeah.
And at some point, I don't know if anybody's looked into it, and if anybody has, please leave a comment, because I'd love to know. But if not, I hope somebody does.
Yeah. Well, I would think that Tim's book will cover stuff like that. There's also a really interesting writer. Sorry.
I also hope that the practitioners will.
Yes, I hope so. That'd be good. Yeah. There's also a really interesting writer called Malidoma Some from Africa, and he writes about his take on queerness is that same-sex relationships are a completely natural part of everything, and you know, a lot of the people in his tradition are bisexual, as we would understand it. I don't think they'd necessarily call themselves bisexual, but that's the closest. And because he was saying, oh, you know, gay people should be allowed to have children, in that, you know, they tend to have both types of relationship.
Oh, that's fascinating. I will have to look into this.
Yeah, good, interesting stuff. Very good.
In a lot of African countries, the homophobia came in with colonization.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
It makes me so sad to see, like, Uganda, where they were trying to put these really draconian laws in to outlaw gayness.
Yeah.
This is like, I don't want to be another colonizer myself. I'm like, this is part of your history and your culture and your people.
Yeah. Well, I think I like to think there's a difference between sort of Christians showing up and telling them everything they do is wrong, and pagans showing up and going, hey, what you were doing was right, you keep doing what you were doing. Like there is a difference between those two views.
Well, it definitely is. I just wouldn't want the pagans coming in and say it, but this is the way you have to do it because this is how we do it.
No, and I don't think we would, because our whole thing is like,
well, we would.
Hey, do the thing that's your local thing.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that like the whole idea of Wicca in the UK is people think that you should, if you're going somewhere else where there's a different, if you're taking your Wicca somewhere else where there's a different set of seasons and things,
Mhm.
that you should adapt the festivals to your local conditions. And obviously that's difficult because you want to avoid cultural appropriation, but
Yeah.
you know, there should be that adaptation to local seasons and stuff, you
Well,
know.
I would see it more like if you were in the southern hemisphere doing Wicca, and your season, but your seasons are just flipped compared to the northern
Yeah,
hemisphere. Then it's just like, well, these are the conditions that are outside.
yeah. But I mean, take Canada for example. Like, you know,
Oh,
in the UK there are snowdrops in February. Like, I've, because of climate change, I've seen people posting photos of snowdrops in December. You ain't gonna get snowdrops, like, you know, it's very snowy outside, there's not going to
yeah.
be any snowdrops here
They have
until
snow,
like
but not snow that time.
March, probably April. No, April.
Yeah.
So, you know, Imbolc takes on a completely different meaning in Canada than it does in the UK. so that's what I mean. You know, I think you have to kind of go, all right, well, what the hell does Imbolc mean when there's still 3 foot of, well, there's still a foot of snow outside, you know?
And it's iced over.
Yeah.
Because we get that here in the southern New England as well, having iced over snow.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think you're actually on about the same latitude as where I am, because I'm on the little pointy bit that sticks down between
Okay.
Lake Ontario and Lake Erie. So
Oh, yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
we're
I think
probably,
we're closer, but then you get the lake effect snow.
well, where I'm sort of a bit higher up, where we're a
Oh,
bit further back from the lake, but
okay.
we get plenty of snow, that's for sure.
Yeah, we've already had plenty of snow here, but
Yeah.
then it all went away, and I want more snow. But anyway, um, so I mentioned before that I've had involvement with heathenry, and there's some measure of heathen practice that I still have, like an ancestral obligation. That's the place where I haven't found the same sort of inclusivity with queerness and with non-binary identities. And there is obviously the example of the really right-wing fascist Nazi type heathens or Odin
Yes, very
who also go by
disturbing.
Odin, and they're not having any of it. But also, it's when I was in heathenry and active in a heathen organization, it felt like it was kind of talked about a little bit, but not really considered in the greater scheme of things. It's like, where do we fit in as a people? Where do we fit in our interpretation of the lore, of the magical practices, of just the spiritual practices? And since I don't interact with that community as much now, I don't know what's changed there.
Mm.
And I hope that there is more of this actual embracing of people who fall outside of the cis heteronormative binary.
Yeah. Well, I've seen there's a guy who writes on the Wild Hunt that writes about inclusive heathenry.
Oh,
Um,
thanks, great.
yeah.
Yeah,
And then there's also a whole load of queer people who've got really into Loki that I've
yeah,
noticed.
yeah. But also,
And
mainstream heathenry in a lot of cases doesn't embrace Loki
yeah,
that
so
well.
there's a whole Loki group of people, and then there's the Rokatru, which I think is to do with
You're
Loki,
focused
also
more
to do with Loki. And like, I've always been really into the Vanir, um, and also friend of
on,
Odin here, because I think Odin is very queer.
yeah, he's very not queer historically, but he's also in our understanding the way we see him now and all the things he does, he's definitely queer and outside. He doesn't care about a binary.
No, he really doesn't.
He'll out that line right, left, and center.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at the myths of Odin, it's like, oh yeah, like
I love Odin as well, and he's the reason why I can't get away from this stuff.
yes,
I wonder,
absolutely.
I do wonder, since my ancestry is Scandinavian, if I have some ancestor way back 1,000 years in war who did some kind of major service to Odin, or if the family line did service to Odin, but I have no way to find out. So it's all conjecture, and the more important thing is what I'm doing now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, you know, one doesn't have to do what one's genetic ancestry
Yeah,
dictates. It's all about the cultural milieu you find yourself in, and how that, you know, what you feel drawn to, you know.
I do think there's a power in knowing what your ancestors did, but it's not necessarily what part of the world they were from or who they were specifically, but it's that knowing your history.
Yes. Oh, that's super important.
Because there's just inherently a power in that.
Yeah.
And there are so many people who don't have the privilege of knowing who all their ancestors are or where they come from. And we need to acknowledge that as well.
Yeah.
And I know just how lucky I am that not only do I know where my family came from, my people came from, I still have relatives in Sweden. So I've been to Sweden a lot, and I've seen like all these some of these pre-Christian artifacts that are just still sitting out on the land because they haven't all been taken away and cataloged. It's just they're there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, I grew up in England for the first 50 years of my life, and you can just pop out and see a burial mound, or and I've met people who've never seen a burial mound, and I'm like, or a stone circle, I'm like, poor thing.
Oh no, yes, they're amazing.
They totally are. But yeah, so you know, it's kind of very weird for me to be uprooted from England, because I got my ancestry done, and all of my ancestry is from the southeast of England, the southwest half. I always get east and west mixed up. It's very embarrassing. So I'm like from this blob in the southwest of England.
Just out of curiosity, how does that figure in relation to Wales?
So like you've got Wales is there, and then it's just below, so then you've got Cornwall sticking out, and it's the bit of England that's next to those two sticky out bits. Yeah
because I know there's the traditional Wicca that was starting to come out 15 years ago was centered around Cornish tradition, so I've read some of the material on that, and that's fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Like there's some parallels between that and Germanic traditions. So one of my dreams is to get a very Germanic rooted, historically rooted type of witchcraft going, but it's hard to get those sources in English to begin with.
That's probably, yes, that would I mean, one of the things I found interesting is that there's a book called The Bathhouse at Midnight, which is about Russian.
I know that book.
Yeah. And I started reading it, and I'm like, this is all based on like standard European grimoires. The thing you want to get hold of for Sweden is the Black Book, which there's a book called Making Witches by Barbara Rietti, which is about witchcraft in Newfoundland, and they were using this thing called the Black Book, and it originated in Sweden.
Okay, yeah, I don't. Maybe the Black Book that I have then is also a Swedish one, but I haven't looked at it in a while. When we talk about books later, we'll get into that whole thing.
Yeah, check it out. Well, that was the next question actually, which is what is your favorite book on queer paganism or polytheism, or favorite book on polytheism?
Well, for queer paganism, I wish I had one. I've been dealing with chronic health issues for about 10 years now, and one of the things that came with it was I lost my ability to voraciously devour books, and I missed reading so much. And I also realized I don't know about a lot of the books that are out there. I told you before, I watched your interview with River Anodian, who is also a friend of mine, and they mentioned Misha Magdalene's book, which I have, and I need to be able to sit down and focus on reading long enough to really get into it, because I've heard nothing but good things about it.
It's great. Yeah.
Also in my TBR pile is Queering the Tarot by Cassandra Snow, and Becoming Dangerous, edited by Kate Elliott, which also, they all just look so good, but again, I wish I could make myself focus on it. I do realize that a lot of what I read in witchcraft now is done by queer folks, is done by non-binary people, but that's not the folk. I'm The bell rings. Oh no, it's an alarm outside. Okay, I feel better now. I was about to get really worried if I heard a silver bell ringing because that's not normal for this house.
Yeah.
But anyway, like, so what I was saying is I read authors who are queer, gay, lesbian, bisexual, who are somewhere non-binary, but that's not the focus of their work. But it influences their work because even if they're talking about something that in theory has nothing to do with queer sexuality or existing outside the gender binary, it's going to influence how you look at things and just what your take is on things, and maybe help you to see things that somebody who is somewhere in cis heteronormativity is not going to be aware of.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, you know, we were talking about the definition of queer magic. I think that is the definition of queer magic, is just having a different perspective.
Yeah. So my favorite book on polytheism at this point, that is a really good question, because I could just start rattling books off that I have loved over the years, because being a librarian, I have in the past read a whole lot of books and a whole lot of articles and a whole lot of blogs, and there's just so much good stuff out there.
Yeah, it's really hard to pick one.
Yeah, like I almost want to talk more about publishers, because we have some great smaller publishers who are putting out material that is pushing those limits and would definitely be welcome under a queer umbrella, like Troy Books.
Yes.
Gamagari doing traditional witchcraft materials and various topics that are intertwined with that, and having all that historical material. It's great. It's beautiful. And it's voices that over here in America we're not hearing as much of, because we've got our American publishers and they're obviously publishing more American authors and people who have an American experience. And I feel like we just need those different viewpoints overall. And like a British viewpoint is not a queer viewpoint, but it's a different viewpoint from what you would have practicing any sort of pagan or polytheist tradition in the US.
Yes. I mean, the more I read of US stuff and British stuff, I definitely see a difference between the two.
Yeah, like I have a friend of mine is actually putting out a book with Llewellyn in a few months that I cannot wait to get a hold of. It's not a queer specific book, but I'm sure there's going to be some measure of non-binary influence in it. And my friend is Kat Heath, who blogs as Sayo Hellrune, and they do amazing work on there, and I love it. And their book is called Elves, Witches, and Gods.
Ooh.
And they're actually originally from the UK, so I suspect you would enjoy this book.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I'll add it to the list.
Yeah, it's coming out in March, and I am chomping at the bit. That'll be a book that as soon as I get it, I'm going to dive right into, because I have waited for a year to read this.
Sounds really good. Yeah.
I'm so excited for it.
Yeah. Yeah, Llewellyn are actually bringing out some really good stuff right now. It's exciting. The stuff that Llewellyn are bringing out is pretty good.
And this book is coming out from Llewellyn.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, Llewellyn has had a really bad rap, because they have put out some questionable material in the past.
Sure.
But they put out my spiritual mother's book on Haitian Voodoo, called Haitian Voodoo by Mambo Chitatan.
Oh yeah, also a good person. Yep.
It is, if you're looking for material about Haitian Voodoo, this is a great book, but it's not going to tell you how to do spooky, evil voodoo magics. It's going to give you 125 pages of Haitian history to start.
Cool.
And I think there's no way you can really do voodoo without knowing what the creation of Haiti is like, and the amount of bloodshed and genocide and destruction of the land has happened in Haiti.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely think people should not be doing African traditional diaspora religions unless you're in solidarity with the people who made those traditions.
Yes, because for starters, you're not going to understand it unless you actually interact with people who are Haitian.
Yeah.
Like our house is a traditional Haitian voodoo house, and our lineage mother is from Haiti, and she now lives in New Orleans, and she is an amazing woman. I've never met anyone like her. And it's also not just that she's Haitian; it's that she is like, oh, how can I even explain Mama Marie? She is an amazing, wonderful woman, and she has done so much for Haitian voodoo and for people in Haiti, period.
Wow.
Because it's not just voodoo. You can't separate it from the culture. You can't separate it from the country.
Yeah.
And Haiti has had a whole lot of hell to deal with
Mm-hmm.
history. And it's like there's always a struggle, and those of us who aren't Haitian and don't live in Haiti, we're doing what we can to help support our family in Haiti.
Cool.
But that's really what it is. It's a family. It's a huge extended family.
Yep. And as a Wiccan, I can relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah, because the way the lineage works.
Yeah.
You're connected. You don't do voodoo in a vacuum.
No. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
You can't learn a lot of voodoo from a book. There's just no way to put hearing stories told by your elders into a print format.
Mm. Yeah, it's got to be an orally transmitted.
It's a very oral. It's very much an oral tradition. Like when I was initiated, when you get initiated as a Hunsu, you're sequestered for 3 days from the world.
Wow.
And there are people who take care of everything while you are in the Jevo. That's the word for where we go when we get initiated.
Wow.
And because you're isolated from the world, you can't like just go out and get something to drink. Somebody has to bring it in for you. So there's always people who are outside making sure that you're okay.
Cool.
Literally 24/7.
Wow. Yeah, and that's a really powerful thing to do.
During the day, there's a lot of people there, and they have conversations. And you hear some very interesting things in those conversations. And you don't have, the other thing is you don't have anything to distract you.
Yeah.
Like you're in there with yourself, the other people who are getting initiated, and there are spirits in there aplenty. And that's it. There's no electronics in there. There's no reading light and a book in there. It's an incredibly transformative experience.
Mm. Yeah, amazing. And not like silent meditation or something like that. It's like interactive.
Yeah, there's definitely some very interactive elements while you're inside.
Yeah, cool. That's very powerful. I like it.
Yeah, and it's one of the hardest things I've done in my life and one of the best things I've done in my life.
I can see that would be, you are on your own resources as well as,
But you're never alone.
No. Cool.
You're never alone.
That sounds really good. Yeah. Amazing.
It is.
It's pretty cool. All right. So do you have a blog or website?
I do have a blog that is rather dormant. I'm doing my best to get myself to start blogging again. It's called Syncretic Mystic. I don't even know at this point if I'm going to stick with that or not. I feel like I've had so many changes in the last several years of my life that it doesn't quite fit anymore, but I don't know what does fit at this point. So there will be a link up at the end. I will do everything I can to have a post up before New Year's Eve.
Cool.
And I'm on Twitter as Skilled Jackal. I don't follow everybody back, but I do look at everybody's profile at the least, and I do interact there a lot. I really like Twitter these days.
Yeah, Twitter is great.
I've made myself a very nice bubble there.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a sort of queer, indigenous, trans, black bubble on Twitter.
I have so much in my bubble. It's but it's a wonderful bubble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like my Twitter bubble. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes. I will stay in my Twitter bubble.
Yeah. But yeah, it's pretty much an anti-racist, anti-oppression bubble.
Same.
Yep. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. Oh, and is there anything else you wanted to add?
Oh, I could get me started on something I could talk for hours. I think one of the biggest things I've been thinking about with this is that while we're all very queer here and we're bringing in this queerness to our practices, I think it's also good to remember that our concepts of queerness and what is and is not standard sexuality and standard gender doesn't apply historically. We have to keep that viewpoint on that yes, historically there were obviously people who had same-sex relations, opposite sex relations, relations that maybe were hard to put into a category, but they weren't viewed in the same way, and in a lot of cases they weren't stigmatized in the same way.
Yeah. I mean, that to me has always been one of the very powerful things about looking back into polytheist history, that we can see that there just isn't any of this nonsense, gender binary and all that stuff. It's just not there.
And I will add, since my main practice is Kemetic, ancient Egyptian, a lot of what is believed kind of on a surface level by people as being part of ancient Egyptian culture comes out of Victorian mindset.
Yeah.
Like, people want to focus on the Book of the Dead and the material that's in there that was badly mistranslated in the 19th century, but I can promise you has been updated with better knowledge of the language and better understanding of the culture. So no, Kemetic tradition in the past was not queer phobic, as we would say it.
Sure, but I think I mean, that's the thing about, you can have individual queer mysteries like the worship of Antinous, or the modern Galley, or I don't know, the radical fairies, or the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. So there must have been in the past, we know in fact that there were in the past specific cults for those specific groups, but also that the wider tradition didn't stigmatize those things for the most part. And that to me is the power of, inclusivity, is like the wider tradition not stigmatizing things, and people can have individual mysteries for their specific stuff. And that's, to me, is what we should be working towards.
Exactly, because what do these cultures really look like on a day-to-day level when these things aren't ostracized?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something we really need to work on ourselves. And it's going to take a long time, and nobody's going to do everything. We're not going to get there in our own lifetime. We're going to lay foundations. We're going to lay bricks on the path, but the work is going to be ongoing. And I think hopefully it'll be ongoing for much longer than we're around.
Yeah.
That is my greatest wish, to see these traditions that we are in continue past like 2-3 generations.
Yeah. Well, if I'm coming back and, I'm going to get reincarnated, I want there to be a paganism for me to join.
Yes, I want, if I come back reincarnated, I want to see the Wab priesthood I'm in still going strong.
Yeah, exactly.
And I also want, as an ancestor, I want to bug the people who come after me. I want to bug the people who have my Kemetic name after me and say, I was Shazat Wepawet back in this time, and let me tell you.
Yeah. Kids these days were...
My statue's still getting passed down. This is wonderful.
Yeah. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
I love that thought. It's great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So yeah, thank you so much for a wonderful interview. It's been great. And obviously we share all your links at the end, and we look forward to seeing more from your blog and Twitter.
I hope so. May it be so. Happily.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.